the fact of the thing and the act of the thing. We've all been hit with the science of reading debates for the past several years, but have you ever wondered why? Where's it all coming from? You might think this debate has been going on for 5, 10, 50, or even 100 years, but it's older than that. In fact, if you looked at the roots of the debate and said, "It's all Greek to me," you wouldn't be wrong, because that's where it started. The core debate isn't just phonics or no phonics in the early grades. It's not only content or skills in the upper grades, but that gets closer to the heart of the matter. At its core, this is a question of what comes first in learning, and what matters more, the fact of the thing or the act of the thing. The ancient Greeks were the first to lay this out. Socrates and Plato emphasized episteme, knowledge of truth and ideas. Aristotle, more grounded, also highlighted techne, the craft of doing, the skilled performance of action. While Plato saw knowledge as the highest aim, Aristotle recognized that knowledge often exists for the sake of skilled, purposeful action. This philosophical divide lives on in modern learning theory, shaping how we think about the relationship between knowing and doing. In the 20th century, psychologist John Anderson built a model showing how facts often become skills through repeated use. Procedural knowledge is compiled from declarative knowledge through practice. On the other side, philosopher Gilbert Ryle argued that intelligent practice doesn't arise from theory alone, quipping, "The bird must first fly before it is stuffed." So why should we care? Why should teachers, dealing with students who often can't remember what you said 5 minutes ago, much less 5 days ago, worry about what the Greeks thought? Because if we misunderstand the order and weight of knowledge and skill, we risk building lopsided instruction. If our kids aren't learning as much as they could, or aren't transferring it when they should, this may be why. So let's dig in. In cognitive science, what we call content is often called declarative knowledge, facts and concepts you can recall and explain. For example, 2 + 2 = 4 is a fact. Addition combines quantities is a concept. Skills, on the other hand, are called procedural knowledge, things you can do with automaticity, like riding a bike or reading with fluency. Most learning involves both. Take math. You need to know what addition is, declarative, but you also need to perform it smoothly, procedural. You need to know the facts and do the steps. Same with riding a bike. You need a basic sense of what the brakes and pedals do, declarative, but ultimately it's learned through riding, falling, adjusting, and trying again, procedural. The question isn't whether both kinds of knowledge exist. They do. The question is, which comes first? Which matters more? Which do we need to build before the other can thrive? Educators draw different conclusions. On one side, E.D. Hirsch argues that content, factual and conceptual knowledge is essential for thinking, reading, and problem solving. On the other, thinkers like Grant Wiggins prioritize skills and transfer, arguing that content is a vehicle for building long-lasting performance. So who's right? My short answer? Content must come first, but skill is ultimately the goal, and the right balance depends on what you're learning. But how do we decide that balance? That's where a simple framework helps. We weigh the task's complexity, the risk of error, and the precision it demands. Let's unpack that. Content comes first means that to learn anything, to know or to do, you need something in your head before you act. You need to know what ingredients are before you cook. You need to know where the brakes are before you ride a bike. A young surgeon must know anatomy before making that first cut. But skill being the goal means this. Knowing facts isn't the end game. The goal is being able to do something with what you know. After a strong foundation of content, you become better at skills. You become a better cook by cooking. You learn to ride by riding. Even surgeons become surgeons not by constantly reciting Gray's Anatomy, but by practicing procedures again and again. So how do we know when to move from knowing to doing? That question depends on three things: complexity, risk, and precision. When it comes to complexity, the more complex the task is, the more content you need up front. A simple task like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich doesn't require much background knowledge. But cooking beef Wellington, that involves multiple components, multiple techniques, and careful timing. Without a base of knowledge to draw from, the whole thing falls apart. Risk also plays a role. The higher the stakes, the more knowledge must come first. Open heart surgery demands deep understanding before a single incision is made. By contrast, cutting out a lopsided construction paper heart for a Valentine's Day crush might be messy, but it won't cost anyone their life. The lower the risk, the quicker you might move into skill practice. Precision is a bit more nuanced. Some tasks demand exactness. Miss a letter and a spelling bee and you're out. Here, content is everything. Other tasks, like telling a story or decorating a cupcake, allow for personal flair and flexibility. They still involve skill, but precision doesn't rule the day. And sometimes tasks like trivia games require high content knowledge, but little procedural precision. You either know it or you guess. This triad, complexity, risk, and precision, helps us decide when content must be front-loaded and when practice can begin earlier. It explains why a spelling bee demands heavy upfront content knowledge, but telling a good story can be learned more through iteration. It's why solving a multi-step math problem requires you to understand order of operations, but free writing your ideas in a journal lets you learn by doing. What does this mean for literacy classrooms? It means that vocabulary, grammar, and spelling often benefit from more upfront instruction. Can a student infer morphological patterns through years and years of reading? Maybe. But explicit instruction gets them there faster, with greater accuracy, clarity, and transfer. Additionally, the more students know about the world around them, the more readily they'll comprehend the average text. Fluency, by contrast, improves through repeated performance, not preamble. While it depends on a foundation of decoding knowledge, fluency is built through reading aloud with models, guided practice, and feedback, not through lectures on what fluent reading is supposed to sound like. Writing works much the same way. Some elements, macrostructures like introductions and conclusions, and microstructures like sentence construction, need to be taught directly. Others, like voice, tone, and rhythm, develop gradually through experience, iteration, and reflection. In the end, both content and skill have value, but not in equal measure at every moment. The act of the thing won't come without the fact of the thing. And the fact of the thing isn't worth much unless it moves toward the act. The real debate isn't content versus skill. The real debate is how much content is needed before it becomes skill. And how do we decide? That's where complexity, risk, and precision come in. Our job as educators is to make those judgments with discernment and direction, because knowing when to shift from content to skill isn't just philosophical banter or intellectual background noise. It's the heart of the job.